Assalamu alaikum. Today in this lecture we will discuss chapter 9, which is about main memory. These are the main topics that we are going to cover in this chapter. The basic objective of this chapter is to give a detailed description of numerous way of organizing memory hardware, and then we will discuss different memory management techniques which include paging and segmentation. Okay, as we know that we discussed it in chapter 1 that memory is something that is central to the operation of modern computer system, and memory is arranged as a large array of bytes, and each byte has its own address, and CPU will execute instruction from memory according to the value of the register that is called program register. And main memory and register are only two storage which your CPU can access directly, and there are machine instructions which take memory address as input argument, but none that take disk address. So your main memory and registers are only storage that CPU can access directly. As we know that register is the storage that is present or that is built inside the CPU, and CPU can generally access these register with one cycle of the CPU. While if we are talking about the main memory, then main memory access may take more than one cycle of the CPU clock, and in this case the processor normally need to stall mean because it does not have the data required to complete the instruction that it is executing, so it has to wait, and this situation is sometimes is not bearable because of the frequency of memory access. So to deal with this stall situation, what we do is we add a fast memory between CPU register and main memory, which is called cache. So cache is built into the CPU, and it by addition of the cache it automatically speed up memory access without any operating system control. But now the thing that is required is protection of memory. What it means by protection of memory? Protection of memory is that if we want our system to work properly, we must have to protect the operating system from access by user processes, and also we want to protect user processes from one another. So this protection must be provided by hardware because the operating system doesn't usually intervene between the CPU and its memory access. So this protection is provided through the hardware. So hardware implement this protection in a different way that we will discuss now. Okay, as we know that shown over here in this diagram, that your processes and your operating system has to be loaded into memory before starting execution. So each process will have a separate memory space. Separate per process memory space will protect the processes from each other, and this is the way we can load a lot of processes at the same time into the memory. So as we know that each process have its separate memory space, then we need some way where we can determine that the range of legal addresses that process may access, so that we make sure that the process can only access its own memory. Like this process should not be accessing the memory of the other processes. So as we know that this protection is provided at the hardware level, it is not provided by the operating system. So on hardware level we use two registers. One is called a base register, another is called a limit register. So the base register will store or will hold the smallest legal physical memory address. Like here, this process smallest legal physical address start from 30040. So base will store the starting address of this process, and limit register will store the size of the range. Like if base register is holding this value and limit is holding this value, then the program can legally access all addresses starting from 30040 plus you will add over here. Okay, I will show you how. Okay, so in this particular example, if base is say having this value and limit is having this value, for this particular process the legal addresses are in the range of this up to this number. And how we got this second number? We add base plus limit minus 1. So starting address will be this, and the last address that this process can access is this one. And then the next process starting address will be 420940. Okay, so anytime when CPU generate an address to execute the instruction from the memory, first it has been checked against the base register of that process. This address should be greater than or equals to base. If it is so, then we will go for this, that this address should be less than base plus limit. If these both tests pass, then CPU is allowed to access that address from the main memory. Otherwise, if any one out of it is being failed, a trap will be generated. Okay, and this instruction will not be completed, because when a trap is generated, it will be treated as a attempt as fatal error. So this way it prevent a user program from accidentally or deliberately modifying the code or data structure of either the operating system or any other user processes. So this is how base and limit register help to provide the protection. Normally what happened is, your program is stored on a disk as a binary executable file, and when you want to run that program, we need to bring that program into memory and place within the context of a process. So then it will become eligible for execution on a available CPU. So as the process execute, what it do, it access instruction and data from the memory, and once process terminate, this memory is reclaimed and can be used by any other process. Most of the operating system allow the user processes to store in any part of the physical memory, but the address space of computer may start at the address 000 that we consider as the first address of the user process. But the first address of the user process not needed to be 000. Your process can be loaded at any place in the memory. Further, we will see that addresses are represented in different ways at different stages of the program life, because program has to go through several steps before being executed. So we can say that addresses may be represented if you have a source program, then in the source program these addresses are represented as a symbol, like variables. Like you have different variables, so these variables are called symbolic address in the source code. Then when you compile your program, then a compiler do what? It binds these symbolic addresses to relocatable addresses. Okay, like 14 byte from the beginning of this module. So this is what? A relocatable address. And then from the compiler the code go to the linker or loader, and then loader will perform a further new binding, and then it bind these relocatable addresses to actual addresses or absolute addresses, like on a memory location 74014. So every time when this mapping is done, we map from one address space to another address space. So this binding occur at any one of the step, either at compile time or load time or execution time. Okay, so binding can be done at 3 different stages. So if binding is going to done on the compile time, then we say that if we know exactly during the compilation of program where the process will store in memory, then immediately we can generate absolute code. But in case if you don't know that where the program will locate exactly at or store exactly at the memory, then we will not generate the absolute code at the compile time. Then we have to do this binding at load time. So in load time, if you do not know at compile time where the program will store, then compiler has to generate relocatable code, not the absolute code. Absolute code is only generated at compile time if you know exactly where your program store in memory. But if you don't know where your program will store in memory, then binding will be done at load time, and at load time relocatable code is generated. So in this case, what happened is final binding is delayed until load time. So if starting address of the program change, we only need to reload the user code to incorporate this changed value. Okay, third is execution time binding. So if the process can be moved during its execution from one memory segment to another, then binding will not be done until runtime. So special hardware must be available for binding at the runtime. And most operating system actually using this binding at runtime or execution time. So here in this diagram is actually being shown the different stages a source program has to go through before start execution. Like you have a source program, first you has to input this program into compiler or assembler, which will generate object module, which will be given as input to linkage editor, and linkage editor will then input this to load module, to loader, and then it will be executed. Okay, when we are looking at the address space of the program, we have two address spaces of the program: logical address space and physical address space. And these two concepts are very important to understand for proper memory management. Now, what is the logical address? Logical address is the address which is generated by CPU, whereas the address which is seen by the memory unit, that is the one when you are loaded the program, that address is known as a physical address or actual address where your code is or instruction is stored in memory. If binding of addresses is done at either compile or load time, then your logical and physical addresses will be same. But if binding is done at execution time or run time, then logical addresses will be different from the physical addresses. And we have seen that most of the operating system perform this binding at execution time, because your program does not stay in the same memory area during its execution, but it moves from one memory segment to another in execution time. So if you are doing binding at execution time, then logical address will be different from the physical address. Okay, then there are two other concepts. What it is? Logical address space. Very simple. What is the logical address space? Is the set of all of the logical addresses that can be generated by program. And what is the physical address space? It is the set of all the physical addresses generated by a program. Okay, the runtime mapping from logical or virtual address. We also call logical address as virtual address. The new term that you are seeing over here, virtual to physical address, is same as logical to physical address. So in the book they sometime use it logical address and some other time virtual address. Both mean same. So the hardware device that is used to map virtual address to physical address is called memory management unit. And there are different ways that memory management unit can map your virtual address to physical address. We will see in the coming slide, but here we will discuss the basic or very simple way that how memory management unit convert virtual address to physical address. Now we know that in the previous slides we have a base register and limit register. So same concept is being used by memory management unit. Now instead of calling it base register, we call it relocation register. Okay, base register is called relocation register, and every time when mapping is done, what happened is you will add every address that is generated by user process to the relocation register to map your virtual address to the physical address. And on on Intel 8086 there are 4 relocation registers that are used for mapping between virtual to physical address. So user program will never see the actual physical address. User program only work with logical addresses. It is generating these logical addresses, and when binding is done at execution time, then these logical addresses will be converted to original to the real physical addresses. Until now what we have known that it is necessary for your entire program and all the data that is related for this process or used for that process to be loaded into physical memory before a process starts its execution. So if we are following this method, it means that the size of a process has been limited to the size of physical memory. So if you do not have enough memory available to bring entire process into the memory, then you cannot execute that process. So this is something considered not to be a good memory utilization. We can have a better memory utilization by using a concept that is called dynamic loading. Now what is a dynamic loading? Dynamic loading means that a routine or a code is not loaded into the memory until it is called. Here routine, you can consider routine as a function. You might have a program which have a lot of functions, maybe many switch statements, different cases, and all these cases are not required to be loaded into memory until that case is true or until that function is called. So in dynamic loading, what we do is process keep this data onto the disk, and it will not be loaded into memory until it is called. So if we follow this method, it will provide us better memory space utilization. Another thing is that dynamic loading does not require a special support from the operating system. So it is the responsibility of the programmer or user to write their program to take advantage of this method. So operating system may help the programmer, but by providing some library routine to implement dynamic loading. But it does not require any special support from the operating system. Like here in this example, you know, we have a CPU, and CPU generate logical address 346, and now we have to map it to the physical address. So mapping will be done based on the relocation register. Now relocation register contain this value, that is the base address or the starting address of this process. So how memory management unit will convert this logical address to physical address? It will just add this 346 to 14,000 and generate the corresponding physical address as 14,346, and then on this memory location your instruction can be accessed by CPU. Okay, now we will discuss the concept of static linking versus dynamic linking. Now what is a static linking? Static linking mean that system libraries are treated like any other object module and are combined by the loader into the binary program image. It means that if you are using some library into your program, so if we are doing static linking, then the code of that system library and your program code all combine by the loader into binary program image and load into the memory everything. Okay, but if we are using dynamic linking, it is same like a dynamic loading. Now in dynamically linked libraries, system libraries are linked to user program when programs are run, but not static linking, like they are not added into the program code itself. So in dynamic linking, like loading mean dynamic loading mean a routine will not be loaded into memory until it is called, but in dynamic linking, linking is postponed until execution time. So if we are using dynamic linking, a stub is included in the image of each library. So what is a stub? Stub is a small piece of code which show how to locate the appropriate memory resident library routine, or how to load the library if the routine is not already present in the memory. So when the stub is executed, it checks to see whether the needed routine is already in the memory. If it is not, then the program will load the routine into the memory. Either way, the stub replaces itself with the address of the routine and execute the routine. Thus, the next time that particular code segment is reached, the library routine is executed directly, where it will not put any extra cost for dynamic linking. So if we are using this scheme, all processes that use a language library execute only one copy of the library code. Like in static linking, if you have a let's suppose a program where we have 5 program and each program are using CMath library, you will load CMath library 5 copies into the memory. But if we are using dynamic linking, we will load only 1 copy of CMath library into the memory, and all programs are linking themselves with that library routine through a stub and can use that library. So now we can save space through dynamic linking. And libraries, 1 copy of library is loaded into the memory, and it is considered like a shared library and can shared by all the processes which require to use that library. We know that process, its code and data must be in the main memory before a process start execution. But in case of a swapping concept, we assume that a process or a part of a process can be swapped temporarily out of the memory to a space that is called backing store, okay, and then brought back into memory for execution. So why we do swapping? Because swapping make it possible for the total physical address space of all processes to exceed the real physical memory of the system, and it increase the degree of multi-programming. Like maybe you have a real physical address space or real physical memory less, but you can execute more number of programs by swapping these process from main memory to a backing store and bringing more processes into memory. So when you do this swap in swap out, swap in swap out or roll in roll out is like when you are moving a process out of main memory to the backing store and then bringing it back. So this concept is called roll out roll in. So by doing this, we are increasing the degree of multi-programming, and we are increasing our actual physical memory more. Yani we have less physical memory, but we can execute more number of program by using this swapping technique. So we know that during swapping, what we do is we move our process between main memory and a backing store, and backing store is usually a fast secondary storage, and it should have large enough space to accommodate whatever part of process need to be stored and retrieved, and it must provide direct access to the memory images. So when a process or part of it is swapped to the backing store, the data structures that are associated with this process must be written back to the backing store. Swapping was used in the traditional Unix system, but modern operating systems are no more using this swapping technique. Why they are not using swapping technique? Because the amount of time that is required to move your entire process between memory and backing store is too much. and it is putting a lot of pressure on the operating system. So that's why we said that major part of swap time is transfer time. So total transfer time is directly proportional to the amount of memory swapped. Mean if you have to swap more memory, it takes more time. If you have to swap less memory, it will take less time. And when you are going to make a decision of swapping, this decision can be made based on the priority of the process. Like low priority process can be swapped out or moved out from the main memory, so that higher priority process can be loaded into the main memory and can execute. And we know that we have two type of scheduling. One is CPU scheduling, that is short term scheduling, and one is long term scheduling or job scheduling. So here this ready queue is related to job scheduling. This ready queue is maintained on the disk, so all the processes which are ready to run, we keep the record of all these processes into the ready queue, and then long term scheduler will decide which process will be moved from ready queue or from the hard disk to the main memory. Okay, when we are performing this swapping, so the process that you move out from the memory, that is swapped out process, and when you bring that process back into the memory, that is swap back. So will it swap back into the same physical address? No, it depends on the address binding method. If binding is done on compile or load time, then it will be bring into the same location. But if it is done on the execution time, then it will not be bringing into the same location into the memory. As I told you that when we are talking about swapping, it means we are swapping the entire process out of the memory to make a space for a new process and bring a new process into memory. So this swapping concept is no more used in the modern operating system. Modern operating system are using the modified version of swapping. Okay, in the modified version of swapping, we do not swap whole process out of the memory and bring a new process, but a part of the process will be moved out of the memory and make a space for the new process. So this modified version is actually a paging that we will discuss after this swapping concept. So on the modern operating system, usually this swapping is disabled, but we can enable it only, or it can be start on the operating system only if threshold amount of memory is not available. Yani you make a threshold, an upper limit, like we should a minimum available memory all the time on the system should be, let's suppose 64 MB. So if our threshold is 64 MB, if available free memory go less than 64 MB, okay, then swapping may be done, and once your demand will be reduced, then it can be again disabled. So this is how the swapping work. We have a backing store on the hard disk, okay, secondary storage, and a complete process will be moved from main memory to the backing store. That process is called swap out, and when a process P2 is loaded into the memory, it is called swap in. Okay, in this slide we will discuss that context switching will take a lot of time if we perform swapping. Here in this example, we assume that next process that a CPU is going to be executed is not in memory, so we need to swap out one process from memory and swap in the target process that is now going to be executed by CPU. So if we assume that the size of the process which is going to swap out is 100 MB and the transfer rate is 50 MB per second, so swapping out time will be 200 millisecond. How we get this 200 millisecond? 100 MB divided by 50 MB per second, so you will get 2000 millisecond just to swap out, or 2 seconds to swap out this process. Swap out mean moving this process from main memory to backing store, okay. And then you have to swap in also a same size of a process. If you have to swap in same size of a process, then it will take again more 2 seconds, or 2000 milliseconds. So total time or context switching time that only used in swapping in and swapping out will take 4 seconds, which is really a lot of time. It's really a high time. So that's why swapping is most of the time is disabled in operating system, or it is avoided. The swapping time can be reduced if instead of swapping out the entire 100 MB process, we just swap out a part of it. They said that the swapping time can be reduced if the size of memory swapped is less. So if you know already how much memory really being is used by a new process, so instead of swapping out whole 100 MB process, you might swap out only that much part of this process which is required by a new process. So the system call that inform how much memory is being used by a new target process can be done by through system calls. These request memory and release memory system calls can be used to inform how much memory is required by the new target process. So it will reduce the time of context switching that is used in swapping. The other constraint that also are there with respect to swapping is pending IO. If IO is pending, then you cannot swap, because it is possible that IO would occur to the wrong process. So or what you can do is you can transfer IO to kernel space instead of IO device, and this thing is called double buffering. Now what is a double buffering? In double buffering there are two buffers in the system. One buffer is used by the driver or controller to store data while waiting for it to be taken by higher level of the hierarchy, while the other buffer is used to store data from the lower level module. So double buffering is also known as buffer swapping, and the major disadvantage of this double buffering is that the complexity of process get increase. Okay, so that's why standard swapping is not used in modern operating system. Standard swapping mean swapping out the entire process and swap in an entire process. So standard swapping is not used in modern operating system. Its modified version is used. Modified version mean that instead of swapping out the entire process, a part of it will be swap out and part of it will be swap in. But this swapping will be only used when free memory is extremely low, like we have discussed there. When we have a threshold memory less, when we have a memory less than the threshold, then we enable swapping temporarily, and when we have enough memory we will just disable swapping again. Your main memory must have to store both operating system and user processes. So we need to allocate main memory in a most efficient way possible. So here we will discuss how can we efficiently allocate contiguous memory. Now what it means by contiguous memory? Contiguous memory allocation mean that when a process need a memory, you allocate that memory in a full chunk to that process. Like if a process need to load into memory and process size is 200 MB, so we will allocate a 200 MB chunk of the memory contiguously into to that process. So contiguous memory allocation is one of the early method that was being used for allocating memory to the processes. And as we know that we have operating system and user processes both need to be loaded into the main memory. So main memory is usually divided into two partition. One partition is reserved for the operating system and other partition is reserved for the user processes. So we call them high memory and low memory. So mostly your operating system is stored in the low memory, and with operating system your interrupt vectors and all these things, and user processes are stored in high memory. And we are assuming right now that each process is stored in a single contiguous section of the memory. And for the protection of memory, like we want to prevent a process from accessing memory that is not owned by that process by using the concept that we have already discussed in the previous section, that is relocation or base register plus limit register. So relocation or base register will be saving or will be storing the value of the smallest physical address from where this process start loading into the memory, and limit register contain the range of the logical address that this process can access, and each logical address must be less than the limit register, because we have to compare it with this, that your logical address should be greater than or equal to base register and less than base plus limit register, and then MMU will dynamically map your logical addresses to the physical addresses. And when we are using this relocation register scheme to provide this protection, then it also allow operating system size to change dynamically. Your operating system size not need to be fixed, it can change dynamically. And why it is desirable? Because it is possible that operating system contain code and buffer space for device drivers, and if that device driver is not currently being used, it makes little sense to keep the code of that into the memory. So instead what we can do is, it can be loaded only into the memory when it is required or when it is needed. Okay, so if the device driver code is no longer needed, its code can be removed from the memory, and that memory can be allocated to some other processes. So the memory that is allocated for operating system, that is not fixed. Operating system memory is transient, like kernel is changing its size, operating system can change its size. So here we can see that the same concept we have seen previously. If we are using limit register and base register, so how can CPU map your logical address to physical address? First thing is, when a logical address is being generated by the CPU, it must be less than the limit register. If it is not, a trap will be generated. If it is, then it will be added into the base or relocation register content to get the corresponding physical address. So we will stop over here in this lecture, and the rest of the things we will discuss in the next lecture. Thank you so much.